All right, here we go again. So if you're wondering why it says truth up there, I used the signature term truth before Trump ever used it, before truth ever used it. And in fact, I told political parties and other people, if you don't like the social media that's out there, create new ones. Break the mold. If you think the news is too left, make and you have funding and people to do it, move your news right. If you think if the news is too right, make your own news and make it go left. It's just part of the world we live in, and that's kind of a lost art. I guess you could call it the world is dumbed down. So the truth is the real world. There's a lot of things in the real world to include metaphysics, which means hate actually lives. But it doesn't mean somebody can sit there and rant at you. And then I'm not trying to point to myself because they'll tell you I'm speaking about myself, but it could be true about me. Somebody could rant at you and heal you and bless you. Somebody can kiss you, kiss of death, and kill you. So again, these things are real and the truth at the same time. All right, so the programs as far as New York, Black families, 20,000, I would say is probably a wrong figure. I don't think there's deception in there, but what happened is they didn't calculate what housing costs. I could be wrong, but based upon what I've noticed in that community of people, and it isn't a selfish reason, there's a couple reasons there, that their income is actually higher. Now, I'm not telling you the difference between 200,000 and 30,000 or 32,000 or maybe even 35,000 isn't something to note. But giving them money isn't necessarily going to do anything. So we have to get back to the idea. Well, I'm going to come around to all this, why this is important. But we have to get back to the idea of holistic. So, holistic rehousing is a good place to start to understand the process. So you say, well, they have housing, but they are rehoused or never lost their house and were given benefit, but you never entered into the holistic part of it. Well, we gave them detox. They came off the street, but why were they on narcotics? So you have some other issue. Well, I was beaten by my father. I was beaten by my mother. I was raped by my uncle when I was, and again, I'm not speaking about myself, but could be speaking about myself. I think my uncle's the only person that didn't rape me. I was molested. So, but when I was a kid. But if you look at the effort, I speak about modules in rehousing. So you have psychological modules, but they're not all the same. So you have to find what module fits what person. So you see somebody on narcotics and you give them the rehab module, but when a psychologist speaks to them, they find out they also need the abused childhood module, which then you have specialists in how to. I don't know if the word erase is a good term, but how to counsel people out of that issue so that they can function. So functionality is important more than money is. But of course, it costs money. So I'm going to speak about a certain population in every community. And I just recently come up out of that population because I had an increase in my disability. So you have the people that have, and again, moving around to lower cost of living communities has helped me get out of this particular community. So you have your people that my income level would live with, and they didn't make as much money as me, but they had free housing and free utilities, so things like that. So when you take their income, that's why I'm telling you, you have to figure the income with the benefits so you realize who you actually have in your community. Because you could have somebody making $40,000 a year, and you'll find, or $45,000 a year, that they're actually, it's more difficult for them to get somewhere than it is somebody who cash value is making $20,000 a year, because they don't qualify for the benefits. So that's why you'll hear me speak about people that are making like, $75,000 a year or $60,000 a year, that, yeah, they have money, but they're trying to negotiate something that the people making, again, 20 is kind of low, but again, there are people making 20, right? So you have the people making $20,000 a year that they don't have to try to find a house because they have a benefit and they get a house or they get an apartment. They have food money. So the person making more money in 70 is probably a little bit much, but like 50, 60, and they're trying to make ends meet. So when you look at what you need to do, it's larger than you think, but yet simpler than you think. Once you understand who everybody is, and again, this is a good, that they said 20,000 is a good starting point for this, because we have to remember that if you're making 20,000, you might have, in New York, it's possible, between housing and food, childcare, that they have actually, again, I don't know how you do childcare, if it's for everybody or just poor people, low income people, but generally they might be making $50,000 a year. With a person making $50,000 a year, has got to find childcare. They got to find, I know what the cutoff is. I'm just giving an example. Has to find childcare. Has to find housing. Has to feed. So again, you begin to realize that, yeah, we have working poor, quote unquote. Right? Again, you're raising this, doing that. Again, you're going to decide what you want to do. That the problems are sometimes require money, but they're not necessarily just throwing money at people, especially if you have narcotics issues. Well, if you throw money at somebody that has narcotic, I didn't even want the Biden administration to give people money for their kids, like cash value or credits. I said, give them vouchers. If you're directing that at the kids, give them vouchers for child furniture. Give them vouchers, like you give them a voucher and they can buy certain things with it, similar to SNAP program. Where if I give you this additional funding for your kids, it has to be something related to your kids, because I don't want them throwing a party with the money and bringing drugs and alcohol into the house. So again, targeted vouchers are sometimes a better idea. I don't think they've been as accepted as I'd hope they would be. We need to make sure that the money we're putting out there, the best of our ability, is going where we want. So targeted vouchers makes sense. If I'm giving you a bonus for your kid, then I could, we could poll the people, if you want to do it that way, and say, what is it that you need for your child? If I were to give you a voucher for your child, what does your child need? School supply vouchers. You can use it for school supplies. You can use it for, well, theoretically, food is going to be a different program. You can use it for children's furniture, that kind of thing. And then we're ensured that it doesn't go to a half gallon of rum or something. So the issues are more of a social issue than it is a money issue. Well, if you can restore the person, then you don't have to keep giving them money. Illegal alienism is part of the problem. And I'm trying to explain it like this. I shied away from the legal alien term, but then the Democrats used the term immigrant for everything and wouldn't acknowledge that there was an issue with illegal alienism. I was trying to use undocumented. It just, they played around with it. Well, because it's the only way, if you attach the word immigrant to it, it has a certain process. I'm going to explain why. Illegal alienism hurts immigrants on many fronts, and it hurts those Black families. There's two things we can connect to illegal alienism: narcotics distribution, actually a bunch, crime, I guess you would say, but narcotics distribution, sex trafficking, crime. We can also connect the fact that they get jobs. This happens in Chicago. It might be happening again. It sounds like it is. They get the jobs before the Black people. Well, once you create that massive community, they may work cheaper. They may not work cheaper. It does hurt wages. And that came in, I will tell you, from the spirit of the mayor of New York. It does hurt. He realizes it hurt wages. And that's why he works on wages. But our artificially pumping up wages doesn't always do it. Because again, what is one of the things we know about illegal alienism? Under the table. And that's where we also get into the point where they're making money under the table and they're receiving benefits. And again, that may be possible anyway if they would go the legal route. But again, a lot of times maybe they're just taking advantage of it because they can. Again, I'm going to get into another topic in a little bit, and that's called assimilation. And everybody looks at that like I'm stealing away their identity, and I'm not. It just creates a better world for everybody involved if we have a core sense of community and what that means. And again, it's different than you think. Just give me time to explain it. So when we go back to illegal alienism, that's one of your problems. And again, there are people waiting in other countries that will not leave because it's illegal, because they go to church maybe, or they go to whatever it is. They have their community, their community is a law-abiding community. And if they come to the United States and they violate a law, I say, I'm not going to violate a law to come to the United States. I'll wait, and maybe someday I'll get a position. And that's the point. We're letting them down. We're not supporting the people that are waiting and say, hey, I'm not going to break a law. And that's who we want, because there's a lot less assimilation required for those people. So when we get to assimilation, we have an Afghan community that came here and never realized that if you have sex with a 12-year-old, it's not going to be the same thing that happened in Afghanistan. You're going to go to prison for 10, 20, 30 years. It's very important to have assimilation classes. You need to describe the difference between their community and our community. We dropped the ball when they came to this community because that's all they know is whatever's happening in their homeland. So assimilation doesn't strip you of your identity. It helps you learn how to navigate the United States. And I'll tell you what, again, the Democrats made a lot of error. And I said, bring them in, keep them employed. If they're disabled or elderly, I understand, but make it a requirement that they work, but don't go over. What they did is they kept people coming in when we already had enough to work. They didn't manage it. They made a mess. Because I said, you'll see the inflation drop, but the inflation didn't drop when we had the right number because they weren't managing the program right. We should have cut off the massive immigration a couple years earlier, or at least a year, because we had enough people to pull ourselves out of the inflation. But then we had all idle hands, idle minds, and idle hands. That's, any place I've ever been, that's a big concept. It gets them in trouble. Law enforcement, military. Everybody talks about that when you go through their academies and other things. Corrections. They keep people occupied. And when we're not occupied with something to do, then idle hands, idle minds, and they get in trouble. So their simulation is telling these people, instructing them on how to navigate the United States so they don't go to prison. It's that simple. Tell them what the penalties are. Scared straight if you have to. So again, you're not helping immigrants by not forcing a certain level of assimilation. You're actually causing several problems, to include what's causing Black people not to have money. Because if the immigrant doesn't assimilate and they create a workforce, and again, I use the word immigrant, but the illegal alien doesn't assimilate and they create a workforce of illegal aliens, then the Black person isn't employed because they're the employers also. You see how that works? Well, we're in a bad way because things weren't neglected. I mean, did the Trump administration first time around neglect it? Yeah, I told you about the first Trump administration. Those people working for him were the same old slugs. No, for the benefit of the immigrant, we need to cut off the illegal aliens. Now, there's a certain level of that will be honest amnesty. But again, dishonest amnesty screwed everything too. So immigrants, when they come to the United States, or even people that are on parole, whatever you decide you want to do, because the world will change back and forth. So I'm using it for all beliefs and systems. You need a certain level of assimilation. You need to instruct them how to navigate our system. I think a week's worth of classes would be pertinent. And if they miss a class, they can catch up later or something. So let's say you have 5 days worth of classes. Some people, it might take them a month or 2 months to get the 5-day classes done. And then they take quizzes or whatever it is, or as you go along. Kind of pass fail. And then if everybody receives these classes, what do you think happens? They talk about it in the community. They speak about it when they go home, when they go out to the bar, when they go out to the restaurant. It's common knowledge what the assimilation classes are instructing. No, I don't do that because remember they said this. Or they look and they see their partner doing something with a 12-year-old and they say, no. Remember, they told us here you go to prison for 30 years. And it's sad because that happened. And I know you go, well, he's a pedophile. Well, everybody, or not everybody, but there's a large number of people in the world that, they have sex with kids. The Philippines was doing it, and I complained to their dating service. And he told me it's legal here. And he says it's legal in other countries too. That was his excuse. I said, I don't want them on the dating service. What are they on here for? He said, it's 12 years old here. But since then, they've changed the age. So there's a lot of reasons to hate me. They'll tell you the opposite. No, he eventually did take them off his service, and I was part of that. I think he received ultimatums. I think it was before the law was passed. It may have been the law, but I think he received ultimatums from foreign nations that he would be blocked or something. So, well, it's again, the idea is the term is holistic. And that's a term that we have to remember because holistic says that the person is many, and the issue is many faceted. So if we think, okay, you're an addict and all I'm going to do is give you addiction counseling. And then you're like, well, why didn't it work? Well, because the person was abused from 12 years old to 18 years old, and they never got over it. So if you counsel them for that, then it begins to work. And then you find, well, I counsel them for that, but because from 12 years old to 18, they were abused. And then from 18 to 25, in and out of drugs, in and out of relationship. I need to do other types of counseling, such as employment counseling and relationship counseling. You see? And then that person begins to pick up. So you have to continue analyzing and assessing what process you're using to move somebody to functionality, to make them functional. Because when you narcotics is an easy one. Once you discover narcotics or something else, and it could be low self-esteem because their parents said something to them, or their work, and then they went to work, and just a whole bunch of different little things, and they just can't get the steam up and the self-esteem up to get to work. And then when you can't get to work, what do? Medicate and use drugs. Not a difficult process. And you have to heal. You have to be spiritual. So you have to bring your clergy in. You always want to keep your clergy active in the process and remind your clergy about holistic. Again, you should have a core training program for anybody that goes into any of your services to help people, to understand that holistic concept, to understand you may be looking at somebody you think is more functional than you are, but yet there's hidden dysfunction. When I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico, I was speaking to a guy in Lowe's. He worked, a former heroin addict. They said, I'd like to help you. He said, I know of a homeless community where people are living in tents. And I had no idea they were there. We never got to do it because Deep State attacked my life, and it could have been because of that, because the narcotics distributors don't allow that. So because I explained to him, and this is something I left out that I wanted to say, is I said, nobody fails a rehabilitation, a detox program. The program fails them. You see the difference? Well, because if our program fails that person, we need to know why our program failed that person. Then we can readjust the program. And again, that's where I figured out with God. I give all the credit to Hashem, God. That's where I figured out holistic concepts. Is that wouldn't work without a holistic mindset. So then you develop additional modules. That's why I say modules, because your discovery of what you need is going to arrive like that. So so you have a module for narcotics addiction, you have a module for peer counseling, employment count. You can do that's two different. See, that's actually two different counselings. Employment counseling, peer counseling can be employment counseling. That's what I use counselors for, is kind of peer counselors. When I feel like I'm not going to be able to push through something possible. So I go to, I have insurance, so I get a counselor, and they help me push through things. Well, I'm being beat up by the deep state every chance they get. It's genius, actually. And deep state is not a political party. It's in every political party. It's in every religion. In the scripture, it's called the beast in the New Testament. And again, Islam has a term for it, similar to the beast. But I think in Islam, it's doing something it's supposed to do. I have to restudy that. I don't remember that part of it. So I'm going to try to increase my presence on broadcasting on social media and on social media. And we're trying to remove X so we can replace it with something else, and with a proprietor that actually can run a business instead of run the world into a ground, and then somebody gives him another 50 billion, and then he says, oh, I'm rich, and that's all that matters. People will give him money just to destroy the United States. Remember that part. There are people in this world that will pay you to destroy the United States and make you famous as if you're helping everyone. So I'll be speaking on this a lot more. But the idea of income is kind of a question mark, because what you have to look at is, okay, this person makes 20,000 and this person makes 30,000. The 30,000 is more money, right? Not necessarily. If the cutoff is $29,000 a year for housing in New York City, what do you think? The person making 20,000 could be making more money. So you have to develop an equation to understand who everybody is and how their money works. So let's say you have some sort of counseling program. Let's say this person, people don't have insurance maybe. And you look at somebody making $20,000 and you say, yes, we'll give you counseling if you need it for free. And then you look at somebody making 30,000 and saying, no, we can't get it because the cutoff is 29,000. But actually the person making 20,000 is making more money in benefits than the person making 30,000. That's just an off the cuff example, but there's a lot of that. So you have to understand that it's not a dollar figure. Right? Just like if you have three people in your household, or you have one person in your household, or you have one person in your household and that person is disabled. So there's a lot, again, the holistic idea. You have to look at the total issue. Again, a lot of people can do that in the social work world, but sometimes it's a little bit more. And that's that income thing. We get stuck on numbers. Well, because what happens is in Santa Fe, some of the parents have money, but they know the programs exist. So they kick their child out. It's okay, go get a job at a retail store. So they get a job at a store, maybe going to school, maybe not, maybe saving up for school, whatever it is. And then they only make so much. And then they say, okay, you qualify for an apartment. Yet somebody else who's making more money, but not that extra money, because Santa Fe, New Mexico it was expensive, similar to New York City. Maybe not as expensive, but close. Unless you were poor. Then you could live there. See how that works? So if you're making like 45,000, you were living in a place probably less. And that's the other point. They were building new places. So the people that were poor, low income, were actually living in nicer places than the people with money. Which I'm not against that, but it's just a strange thing that as a government, you have to consider. In fact, my friend, before somebody forced her to go homeless, they're doing the same stuff to her that they did to me. And maybe because we were stopping narcotics distributors in New Mexico, people from New Mexico be paying dirty cops here to go after me, or dirty PIs, just to make a point that you get nothing because you came after narcotics distributors with the cops and again, cops were only working so hard and I worked twice as hard at that same goal, as well as other people. And that woman was part of it. Right? They made her crazy. And they try to do it to me where I call the cops on people that don't exist. Because they're trying to discredit the person that called the cops on them. Right. I don't call the cops all that much. I just work. I talk to them. I'm open. I walk up and say, hey, something going on. Not hiding nothing. So she had a place before they totally drove her out that was brand new, like a year old, 2-bedroom. She kept wanting me to come live with her. I said, I can't. It's not lawful. They changed the rules now, I think. I think now it's lawful. You can live with people. I brought that up and they, magically, whether they heard me or not, I don't know, but they changed the rules. You can live with people and not lose your benefits. Because again, it was stunning marriage and things like that too. It's like crazy. How much money do you need? Does your boyfriend have to make before you actually marry him? It's just a crazy world. Or it's a benefit, because sometimes, again, the idea of losing a benefit and a status of being low income doesn't always work. There's like no incentive to actually go to work, no incentive to actually get married. Oh yeah, it's again fixing the system. People are put out. She was put out. I was put out. So they ran her off, but it was such a nice place. All solid floors, which is great in Santa Fe, New Mexico, because of the dust. She lost her dog. Well, she may even be dead at this point. I don't. It's just horrible. But people did that to her, and it's narcos, sex traffickers. Well, stay peaceful. Praise God in all that you do. Praise God.